Now, I want to clear up something. Now, it's usually said, like a cheap shot, politics, Joe Biden has got dementia. The oldest US president in history, he's losing it. But I reckon this issue is really too serious to treat like that, because I actually want to know. I know I want to know, so what if he has? If the leader of the free world does have dementia, how big an issue is it? Or perhaps just taking a few grabs, a few dozen pieces of video of Biden brain phase out of context. Video like this one.
So the best way to get something done, if it holds near and dear to you that you like to be able to, anyway, we're going to get a lot done.
Now, this all came to a head for me last week when Joe Biden did an hour-long question and answer on CNN. Now, for a lot of the time, and I don't think people have been fair on this point, there was no real trouble. No real trouble. He was answering fluently for him. But you couldn't ignore moments like these, for instance, answers to simple questions like, when will children under 12 get vaccinated?
And I've heard you speak about it because I'm not being solicitous, but you're always straight up about what you're doing. Yeah. And the question is whether or not we should be in a position where you are, why can't the experts say, we know that this virus is in fact, it's going to be, or excuse me, we know why all the drugs approved are not temporarily approved, but permanently approved.
That doesn't seem quite right to me, but let's ask an expert. Joining me is psychiatrist and author Tanveer Ahmed. Tanveer, it's great to catch up. Look, I know that you can't diagnose someone just from a few video clips. You need the full range of tests and all that kind of thing. But looking at grabs like that and others that we've run over the last year or two, do you see anything that makes you think, well, something is not quite right?
Look, I think it's absolutely reasonable to raise concerns. I mean, look, it's understandable, age 77, the oldest president, these concerns would be raised. I mean, similar thing was raised when Reagan was in power. Some of the key early signs of dementia, Andrew, is short-term recall, losing track of your thoughts, and we're seeing some key examples there. Sometimes just what's called confabulating, where they're almost making up stories. And Joe Biden actually has a history of that in recent years. On the campaign trail, he'd talk about deals he'd done or trips he'd made overseas while as a member, as a representative, and he just didn't do them at all. Like sometimes they were well before he was even in Congress or he was in a supposed position. He refers to Kamala Harris as president sometimes. So he definitely shows some signs of short-term memory loss, confabulation. And look, he does have a bit of history. Just thinking about his medical history, he's had 2 blood aneurysms 20-odd years ago, just over 20-odd years ago. Now, that suggests he may have some vascular disease. Now, his physician did see him a couple of years ago and gave him a clean bill of health. He also has some acid reflux, which sometimes explains his hoarse voice. He gets that too. But look, I think it's perfectly... Once you're over the age of 75, Andrew, almost 1 in 5 people have some signs of early dementia. And with Joe Biden, you definitely get... I don't think it's unreasonable to ask the question. Now, it could be... the debate is this what's known as benign senescence, which is really... It's a bit of ageism, but it's ageism grounded in fact that as you age, you can just get little bouts of short-term memory loss. But as long as it's not sustained, you can say, OK, no, he's still got a clean bill of health. I mean, the other problem with Joe Biden is, it is probably steadily getting worse in the last sort of 12, 18 months. And that is a feature of dementia, where you're kind of seeing a steady, gradual decline. So there's some big questions. I don't think it's unreasonable to raise these questions. We should give a bit of a historical backdrop here.
But what I ask you too then is, so what? I mean, look, to underline, I am taking clips from interviews where for the most part there's no problem at all, right? It's talking fine and then suddenly, boom, the memory goes. So what is actually the problem, even like with early dementia, for instance? Are you actually fine? Is your judgment still perfectly okay? Once you get back your train of thought, you recollect that, oh yeah, that's where I was going, or are you really not quite up to the job?
Depends what stage of it is. the early signs can be short-term memory loss, but also really in terms of trying to take in the complex concepts and taking large amounts of information, which the president would be expected to do, that would be extremely difficult for him. I mean, he was able to get through some of the debates, through whether it be Bernie Sanders and through the sort of Democratic campaign and obviously later Trump. So he sort of just hung in there. So you get the feeling he's almost just holding on, which can be a feature of dementia, where as long as you've got enough people supporting you, you can sort of just hold on. And I think there's a bit of that going on with Joe Biden. It'll become clearer probably in the next 12, 18 months. I do think if there was clear signs of dementia, you'd probably see his inner brass, sitting with him meetings all day, etc., Kamala Harris and some of his closest aides, I think would become very clear to them fairly rapidly. And you may well see some leaking. I mean, you can imagine Kamala Harris is, she'd be in prime position in the event.
Don't even go. Stop terrifying my audience there, Tanveer. I don't think we're ready to even contemplate that yet, but you're quite right. I think it's also interesting they've limited his engagements to about one a day, which is a very light load. But anyway, we shall see. Tanveer Ahmed, thank you so much for your time.
Pleasure. Thanks, Andrew.